right, hello everyone, and I hope you guys just had a great snack time, have some good food, and are ready for this afternoon's sessions. My name's Kara Mosley, and today I am going to be talking with you about our journey through how we managed intercompany chargeback and all of the major technical changes we had to make along the way to get to a process that worked well for us. And so I'm going to talk through a couple of different items. The first one is going to be just helping connect you to why our business really cares about intercompany chargeback and what our Cloud 1.0 and Cloud 2.0 architectures looks like, because we found our account structure became really critical in our chargeback processes. And those kind of get us through our walk and our crawl phases, and then we're going to go into what are our plans to get to running, because we know we're not done yet with how we're managing our chargeback processes. And so first, for a very brief overview, I work for a company called Koch Industries, and many of you don't know, but we are one of the largest privately owned companies in the United States, and we manage a bunch of different business units in various manufacturing industries and even commodity trading, fertilizer, and all of these businesses operate very separately. And what's really unique about us is we look at opportunities where we can leverage shared opportunities between these businesses. And I work for our shared service organization, which has to be better than each of these companies' market alternatives. So if we are going to provide a service to ourselves, we have to be better than what they can buy in the market, either value or cost. And fundamentally, we have to be able to charge out our services so that they can see it's better than their alternatives. But back in 2016, all of our businesses came together and said, hey, we want to start going to the cloud. We want to exit our data centers and start working on our cloud strategy. And so that resulted in a new opportunity for our shared service organization to build our brand new cloud platform teams. And that really became the catalyst for us needing to develop and invest in a FinOps program. And as we think about our FinOps journey, we had a couple of factors that really helped us accelerate building a FinOps team from day one. And the main one was we had to do intercompany chargeback. And we already had a really good partnership between our service owners and our finance organization to accomplish this. In our model, our finance and accounting teams, they don't actually own the billing. Anyone who's providing the services, they own getting good quality data to the accounting and finance teams to then run through the system. The finance teams don't actually own it. And so it really helped us in day one connecting our technical teams to what our finance team needed from them. And because within the first month, we couldn't open the CUR file on our individual computers, and we knew we couldn't slow down our cloud migration journey, we didn't even think about, do we build or do we buy? We went directly to the market and bought our FinOps tooling from day one. And so we've been using the same tool, Cloudability, for the last 7 or 8 years. But thinking through knowing that our chargeback outcomes needed to be fundamental, it really helped us get good alignment before we even started building in our cloud environment. And so it really started when we thought about how we were going to design our platform. We knew since we wanted the service to be scalable and leverageable, we decided that we should just have one payer account with AWS. It made it easy for our finance teams to pay one invoice at the end of the day and only had one item to reconcile to. But we also knew we needed to give our companies the ability to segment their own accounts so that they could manage what was unique to their business. And so each of our businesses got accounts that were prefixed with their company name, so we could easily differentiate who owned that cost. But we had a lot of technical limitations from day one, and that was because of our lift and shift strategy and the way that our network was configured. And so when we built our cloud environment initially, each business could only have 2 accounts that were connected to our network. They could have a production and a non-production account. If they didn't need to be connected to our network, they could have as many accounts as they wanted. But that led to some pretty interesting outcomes. Because we did a lot of manufacturing, our applications, they really couldn't be cloud native. Many of them were lift and shift. And what resulted was almost all of the businesses had 90% of their cost in 2 accounts. Multiple applications and multiple teams all sharing 1 account, which made us really rely on user tagging. And I know most of you know, users aren't great at tagging the resources if they don't have to. So we ended up with a lot of untagged spend in 2 accounts and a lack of ownership. But we thought we had a process all designed before we built it, and it was going to be really easy. Our picture-perfect process was going to have 4 tags that were required across our enterprise. You had to know your company code, your cost center that you wanted your business to book your expenses to. There had to be an owner. Someone needed to be responsible for it. And we gave them an item ID. We didn't define it. Nobody could agree on what it should be, so we said, hey, it can be whatever you want. We'll just send it through your bill, and you can do whatever you want with it. And then we said, all of our users are going to tag their resources. We'll use cloud champions or advocates to share this with their teams so that they know that this is an expectation. And then we'll take all of our metadata, we'll run it through Cloudability, and we'll load it into the billing system. It was going to be really, really easy. But it didn't actually work that way. There were some things that we think we got right on day one. From our account structure, we could at least tell which business owned the costs. So even if they didn't tag it, I knew what company I needed to bill those charges to. And the 4 tags that we set at the beginning of our journey, they matched our billing outcomes. So we really didn't need to make any changes to what those tags were. And because we went and got tooling on day one, we could make our enterprise billing report available to anyone in the company, and they could see what their cloud bill was going to be before it got billed to them a month later. So there was one source of truth. But we had some pretty major problems that we needed to think through. The biggest one was shared ownership. Because multiple teams were sharing 1 account, it led to tragedy of the commons. If something didn't get tagged, nobody owned it, and everyone was afraid to delete it. So we had big cost increases as well. And our tagging strategy from a practical point of view, although the tag keys might have been beneficial, we didn't have a way to enforce them or even validate that the tags were good. My favorite, most commonly used example is cost center 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everyone loved to use that one. So we knew that just based on that, we needed to go and do something better. And so we looked at how can we go back to the drawing table and get to a better strategy. And we started with 3 key outcomes that we thought would help us close the gaps we were seeing. The first one was we needed to go back and evaluate our cloud strategy with how we set up our accounts. We knew we needed automation. It wasn't going to fix everything, but we could at least stop the bleeding. And we knew we needed to go and advance our FinOps strategy. So we went back and looked at our accounts and knew, well, if it was connected to the network, everyone was sharing it, and that was a big problem. But if it wasn't, we found that the accounts were being used for a single application, for a single team, and everyone knew who owned it and knew who to bill those charges to. And our security team liked it, and our compliance team liked it, and our customers liked that. And so we went back and worked with our technical resources and with especially our networking team to figure out how could we build our accounts in a way that allowed us to stay connected to our network, but segment it to one application and one workload. And ultimately, we were able to create a new account type for all of our customers to use, which we called our micro accounts. It was intended to be micro, small, just for one use case for one team. And you could have as many as you wanted. And this allowed us to drive really clear ownership for who was going to manage that cost and where should that cost go at the end of the day. But we knew we wouldn't get out of our legacy accounts on day one. It took us years to get to the cloud. It's going to take us years to get out of those legacy accounts. So we have to learn how to manage that in the time being. And so as we were redesigning how we were going to capture micro accounts, we went and worked with the finance teams to say, what data do you really need? What's missing today? And the big one was we didn't know where the cost center should be. If it didn't have one, it went to cost center 0, which we all know doesn't actually exist. So we asked the teams who were requesting new accounts to provide us that information on day one. If nothing gets tagged in your account, at least tell us where it should go. And we built that into the approval process and stored it in a database that could go to our ServiceNow environment for visibility, as well as be loaded directly into Cloudability so teams could see, hey, my resource isn't tagged, but here's where it will get billed if I don't do anything about it. And so it gave us one source of truth for our billing and allowed us to build an exception process. And then we focused on where can we profitably implement automation to help us just get through day one. And we knew it wasn't going to solve all of our problems, and it wasn't going to be perfect right out the door. And so we did some analysis and found when teams were asking their engineers to go look and see where to book this cost or what resources were causing the majority of it, based on what type of services we were using, it was EBS volumes and snapshots that just weren't getting any tags applied to them. And so instead of spending time going and researching and chasing that down, we said, let's start with one use case. Let's build some automation. So if you tag your EC2, if you just tag one thing, I'll apply those same tags to your volumes and your snapshots, and we can at least solve the problem in one area. And we found that by doing that, our engineers were able to go spend more time working on things that were higher value for the business, and it solved a lot of the problems that we were seeing in our bills at the end of the month. And so we really developed what we called our find and replace process. If it was tagged and if it was valid, we billed it to you, just as you input it into our system. But if it wasn't tagged or you chose to use cost center 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we didn't bill it to you like that. We used what was provided for that account and generated that in Cloudability, still shared it with the organization for visibility, and we're able to get better data to our customers and to their finance teams so that they could have more meaningful conversations. But there were some key components that we did from an organization that helped us advance FinOps. The first one was everyone was uncomfortable with how we were managing shared costs. It was really impossible. And so we took feedback from across the organization to find another way. And it helped a lot of our teams make better decisions because they knew what was theirs. Our finance teams could spend time working on things that were more valuable. And we started to build a community between different capabilities where our networking and our security teams and our customers and their application teams and their finance teams all started to see not only technical outcomes and billing outcomes were all related to one effort. And we started to get some traction around FinOps. But we're not done yet. We still have a handful of opportunities that we want to go after because we still have untagged spend. We still have things that we're really trying to learn how to manage. The first one is we're trying to go back and rethink the role that tagging plays in our environment. We try to move fast on day one, and we didn't define a lot of our tags. We let item ID be a field that we could use for anything. Some people used it to be their on-prem server number. Some people were using it as application. Some people were coming up with something completely unique to them. And what we found is it's actually causing a lot of downstream issues, because when we try and normalize data across the organization, everyone's using their tag keys similar but different, and we can't agree on what good should look like. And so we're working on bringing all of our businesses together to look at what are the things they're trying to measure and what are they trying to capture, and remove differentiation that is preventing us from using enforcement and automation in the future. It's not easy, but it takes a lot of empathy and a lot of customer conversations to understand why and what they want to achieve and connect them to business outcomes. We've got concerns from our compliance teams and our security teams that we're not tagging our resources. We don't know who owns it. And FinOps wants to know who owns it in case there's right-sizing opportunities. Security wants to know in case there's an event, and our business teams want to know who owns it so they can better manage their resources. And so we're moving to look at how do we enforce data that should be in our environment. And we're a big user of ServiceNow. So we are running some experiments to say, can we use our APM module? So teams only have to learn how to use one tag key. That's all they have to apply on their resources. That's all they need to put in their code. And we'll develop the automation to enforce the rest of the tags that we want to those resources. It can be different by business, but we'll give you one place to manage all of your values for that application, and we'll take care of applying them for you. And then that way, if your cost center changes, if your business reorganizes, if somebody new owns those resources, you make them in one place, and we'll make sure it gets on all of your resources for you. And we have to bring the engineers along so that it's designed around them, so that we can make the right way that we want really easy for those teams to adopt and evangelize that across our organization. And our main focus to make this happen is really focusing on advancing our FinOps culture. Today, we have a small team of 2 or 3 individuals in our shared service organization, but we don't have FinOps teams in the rest of our businesses. So we're looking at how do we invest in that hub and spoke model so that we have champions and advocates for FinOps in each of those organizations to help us achieve these outcomes and get better feedback so that we can focus on raising up all of those great ideas that exist across our organization and make our intercompany chargeback process better for the finance teams and better for the engineers so that teams know what they own and what they want to manage in the future. Are there any questions?
Yeah. You said that you're migrating from an on-prem to the cloud. Do you do chargebacks for the on-prem resources that teams are migrating away from? And if not, how do you prevent the mentality of, well, private is free?
Yes, so we do chargeback for on-prem resources as well. And that model it's similar but different. We've tried to break down our on-prem billing model to represent similar unit economics. So you get billed per gigabyte of storage. There's a couple different storage types that we have. They have different pricing. You get billed for having a server or server support based on kind of your CPU usage. So it's similar, but it's not apples to apples. So it is sometimes challenging for teams to look and say, here's what I was billed exactly on-prem for this resource, and here's what it costs in the cloud, because we're not enforcing the tagging. So it's really hard to say, here's what it was here, here's what it is now. But we've also thought about, as our teams have been migrating out of those data centers, making sure that we are looking at our cost internally as well. So as we migrate, we know there's going to be a bubble where our data centers aren't going to be as leveraged, and we're adjusting our pricing to match that.
Question about the, one of the slides had shared costs, so curious how that was being handled, situations where maybe tagging would break down because of multiple users.
Yeah, so shared costs became a large challenge when we had legacy accounts, and this is where we didn't do a good job of supporting our own businesses and solving that problem. In the legacy accounts, if things weren't tagged, we sent each of the businesses a bill and said, hey, you just figure it out. You work with your engineering teams, and if you don't like the cost center I went to, well, here's who you can talk to in your business because you didn't do what we told you. And unfortunately, I was at one point the accountant who was trying to break that down for my business. And we actually told our cloud platform team that owned cloud spend and was building that automation, we said, hey, if it's not tagged, it's going back to you. And it wasn't fair to them because we had several other teams across the organization not tagging their spend, and another team was paying for it. And so we had a place to manage it from an accounting perspective, but it didn't drive the right ownership. And so we started developing reporting that was sent out to all of our leaders with what the untagged spend was for the organization, and dedicated a resource to spend part of their time in using CloudTrail logs to understand who turned on the resource and start talking to those teams individually and asking them to go back and tag it. And ultimately, after a couple of years, we said, hey, if you haven't tagged it and we've reached out to you, you get 14 days and we're deleting it. And that was good enough for teams to either start tagging their resources, or we shut it off and found out, hey, we should have done this years ago because nobody actually cared about the resource.
Any other questions from the crowd? Oh, here you go.
ServiceNow perspective, how are you tagging that? Thank you. From a ServiceNow perspective, how are you tagging things? Is that the source of truth for the application layer?
Yes, so
Okay.
That's what we're working on. So we are using the application portfolio management module, and we don't have all of our applications in there. So our ServiceNow team has an effort to drive more teams across the organization to use that module. And so we're going together on it to say, hey, if you want teams to be using it because you see value in it, and we want teams to be using it because we see value in it, how can we go together to all of the different teams and say, hey, why aren't you using this? We made it really compelling. You can manage everything in one place, you don't have to tag your resources, and we're hoping that we can make it easy so that teams prefer to use it better than their alternatives.
You mentioned about leveraging automation. So how did you, from your own experience, the percentage of automation that the amount of effort that went into the automation and the actual results, not really a financial number, but the results and output and ongoing maintenance, how do you see that being adopted and being practiced?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. So I'm leading our engineering team right now, and so one of the things that I ask our teams to do before we go and build automation is think about the costs. So think about the investment or the time that it's going to take you to build it and maintain it. That's one piece. And then we ask them to think about the opportunity cost of what was your alternative? And in this case, our alternative was we had a full-time analyst and an engineer spending about 3 or 4 days a month just looking at untagged cost. And so we knew if we spent less than 50 days building it and maintaining it, it was going to be a good bet. It took them about a week or two to build it, and so I think it paid off, and it's still running today, but it's not being actively maintained, and that's why we're looking at using some better, longer-term solutions for tagging.
All right, thank you. Anyone else have questions today? All right, let's give a big thanks to Kara for sharing your story with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching that session. I'm sitting here in San Diego right after FinOps X. We hope you join us next year here live 2024. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel and join the community. Get involved, join the summits, get in a working group, and don't forget to get FinOps certified. Because next year here in San Diego for FinOps X, it's going to be twice as big. Come join the party. Come meet your people. Welcome home.